The phone rang just after 9 when the house was still half dark and the kettle hadn't started its steady whistle. I almost didn't answer. I'd been awake since dawn, replaying the same small thought that had followed me all week. How quiet it had been since Frank passed, how every noise seemed to belong to someone else. The screen showed an unfamiliar number. I pressed it to my ear anyway. Mrs. Carter. This is Clara from First Union. I just wanted to confirm your co-signature on a $300,000 loan under Ryan Carter and Lena Carter. Could I verify I must have misheard her? My son's name came through clear, but the rest tangled in disbelief. I told her she had the wrong person. She hesitated before apologizing, her voice too polite, too careful. When the call ended, the kettle screamed, and for a second I thought the sound came from inside me. I stood in the kitchen phone, still in hand. Co-signature. The word crawled down my spine. I hadn't co-signed anything since Frank and I bought this house 32 years ago. By habit, I reached for my checkbook thumb, grazing the ridge of old carbon copies. The last time I'd signed Ryan's name on anything was a loan for his first car, $15,000, and a promise to pay me back. He never did, but I didn't need him to. He was my son. That was payment enough, or so I'd told myself then. The front door opened without a knock. Ryan always let himself in as if the key he'd kept from college years still meant this was his house too. "Morning, Mom," he called. He smelled faintly of cologne and stress. Lena followed a step behind, eyes red-rimmed. I glanced at the clock. 9:30. Not even an hour since that call. "Got time for coffee?" I asked, masking the tremor in my voice. "Sure. Let's talk," he said, and something in his tone flattened the air between us. I set 2 mugs on the table. Ryan took one sip and launched into a story about a small investment opportunity, words spilling out too fast. Lena stared at her hands, twisting her wedding ring. Then he reached into his briefcase and slid an envelope across the table. The paper caught a strip of morning light, sharp as a blade. "It's nothing serious," he said. "Just some refinancing paperwork. You don't even have to read it, Mom. You trust me, right?" I touched the envelope. My name was printed neatly in black beneath a line meant for a signature. My stomach tightened. "Refinancing what exactly?" "Our home," Lena murmured. Her voice cracked. "It's just until the business picks up again." I looked from one to the other. His jaw clenched. Hers trembled. I thought of the call, the banker's precise tone, the careful pause before apologizing. I felt the distance between us stretch and thin, as if the house itself were leaning to listen. "I got a call this morning," I said slowly, "from a woman at First Union." Ryan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, that must have been a mix-up. I already sorted it." "Sorted how?" He shrugged. "Paperwork gets messy when you're moving funds around. They probably attached your name by mistake." "I'll fix it." He said it too easily, like someone used to smoothing over cracks without ever sealing them. The clock ticked loud and steady. I folded my hands together, feeling the ridges of age along my knuckles. "I think I'll read it first." Ryan leaned back, trying for a laugh. "Mom, come on. You always overthink. It's just family business." Lena's cup rattled against its saucer. She whispered, "Ryan, maybe?" He shot her a look that made her fall silent. I slid the envelope back toward him. "If it's just business, you don't need my name on it." For a moment he said nothing. Then softly, "You don't trust your own son." The words landed heavier than they should have. I saw the boy he used to be holding up a report card, proud and certain I'd always say yes. I felt the tug of habit, the maternal instinct to mend whatever had broken. But beneath it was something colder, sharper, a warning. "Trust," I said, "has signatures on both sides." He laughed once, humorless. "Fine, I'll handle it myself." He gathered the papers too quickly, edges crumpling under his fingers. "You've changed, Mom." He left the cup half full and the door half open. Lena lingered a moment longer, her eyes wet, her lips parting as if to speak. But she only whispered, "I'm sorry," and followed him out. When the house went still again, I sat down. The envelope's outline burned into the table like a shadow. Outside, wind pressed against the windows, the faint promise of winter. I told myself it was over, just another misunderstanding. But the silence that filled the room felt heavier than truth. I reached for my phone. Clara's number glowed on the screen. My thumb hovered above it, shaking. I didn't call back. Not yet. Instead, I opened the drawer beside me and slipped the folded envelope inside beneath old letters and unpaid bills. The drawer shut with a soft click that sounded like denial. Later, when I went to pour out the cold coffee, I noticed a small streak of ink on my fingertip, thin black and stubborn. I rubbed it, but it didn't come off. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak in the house sounded like a whisper I couldn't quite catch. The envelope in my dresser drawer seemed to hum beneath the floorboards, alive with its own pulse. Around 2 a.m, I got up, padded barefoot to the kitchen, and boiled water for tea. I didn't need caffeine. I needed warmth. The house felt colder lately, as if it knew something I didn't. When daylight finally came, I tried to fill the morning with ordinary tasks, watering the plants, folding laundry, reading the same paragraph of the paper over and over. But my mind kept circling back to that word co-signer. It didn't belong to me, not anymore. I'd spent decades signing things for Ryan: permission slips, job references, birthday checks. Each one felt like proof of love. But somewhere along the line, the meaning changed. Signing had become surrender. At 11, the phone rang again. Not Clara this time. Ryan. "Morning, Mom," he said brightly. "Too bright. Just checking in. Did you look over the forms I did?" I said. I could hear traffic behind him, horns blaring. "And I don't understand them." He sighed. "You don't have to. I'll handle it. Ryan, it's my name on the page." A pause. Then softly, but with a hint of frustration, "You always think the worst. It's just a guarantee temporary until we get this project finished." I stared at the steam rising from my mug. "What project?" "You wouldn't understand the details," he said. "Crypto markets leverage positions. Look, Lena and I have it under control." Crypto. The word was foreign and slippery, like something that could disappear overnight. "I don't want to be involved in any loans," I said. "Not with my house, not with my name." Another pause, heavier this time. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "Harder for who?" He didn't answer. The line went quiet, then clicked off. I stayed at the table for a long while, tracing the grooves in the wood where years of family dinners had left faint scars. I remembered Ryan at 16 slamming his fist down after an argument with his father about curfew. Frank had told him, "One day, son, being a man will mean hearing no and walking away anyway." Back then, I thought the words were harsh. Now they echoed like prophecy. That evening, I opened the old photo album. There was Ryan in his cap and gown, his arm around Frank, both smiling in that effortless way men do when they believe the world is still theirs. I'd taken that photo. I'd been the one holding everything steady behind the lens. A knock at the door pulled me back. When I opened it, Lena stood there, shoulders hunched under a light jacket, her eyes swollen from crying. "Can I come in?" she whispered. I nodded and led her to the couch. She twisted her hands together. "Ryan's not himself lately," she said. "He's scared. We both are. Scared of what the investors, the people he owes." I felt my stomach turn. "How much does he owe Lena?" She hesitated. "More than we can ever repay. 300,000, maybe more. He thought he could fix it before you found out. So he decided to fix it with my house." Tears welled in her eyes. "He's desperate, Evelyn. He keeps saying he'll lose everything if we don't act fast." "Everything," I repeated, my voice low. "What about me?" She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I handed her a tissue and waited, but she just shook her head. When she left, I stood at the window watching her walk down the driveway. The sun was setting orange light catching on the frost of the car roof. I thought of Frank again, how he used to warn me that love could blind as easily as it could heal. I turned back toward the dresser. The envelope waited quiet and patient. I opened the drawer, slid it out, and stared at my printed name beneath the empty line. "Not this time," I whispered. Then I tucked it back, locking the drawer. The sound was small, but it felt final. Clara called again 3 days later, her voice calm, but edged with unease. "Mrs. Carter, I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to confirm something," she said. "We received a signed authorization from your email address attached to a $300,000 refinance request. Before processing, I wanted to double-check. Did you send that?" For a second I couldn't speak. My own name, my own email. No, I managed finally. I didn't send anything. Clara exhaled almost in relief, but also concern. That's what I thought. The file came through incomplete, and something looked off. Would you mind coming by? It's better if we look at this together. The word together felt like a lifeline. I agreed before I could second-guess myself. By the time I reached the bank, the sky had turned pewter gray, the kind of light that drains warmth from everything. Inside, Clara met me with a sympathetic smile. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe late 50s, tidy brown hair, clear eyes that missed nothing. She led me to a private office and closed the door. Here, she said, placing the papers in front of me. This is the version we received. I leaned forward. My name sat neatly above the typed line, followed by a scanned signature mine. But it wasn't. I could tell. The flourish at the end, the loop of the C in Carter, it was too smooth, too even. I'd signed my name tens of thousands of times in my life, and it had never looked that perfect. My throat tightened. That's not me. Clara nodded slowly. I didn't think so. It matches a signature from a mortgage deed 20 years ago, looks like it was copied. I can flag this for fraud, but I need you to file a formal report. I gripped the edge of the desk, my knuckles whitening. That would mean my son forged it. She hesitated. It would mean someone used your signature without consent. Her kindness only made it worse. I wanted to cry or shout or deny everything. Instead, I straightened my shoulders as if posture could hold me together. I'll think about it. Clara studied me carefully. Mrs. Carter, this happens more than you think, family, close friends, caregivers. People assume it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. Please don't let guilt decide your next step. Her words lingered long after I left the office. Outside, the wind sliced across my face. The parking lot shimmered with frost, every car coated in thin silver ice. I pulled my coat tight and stood there for a long time, staring at my reflection in the bank's glass door. My eyes looked older than I remembered. By the time I got home, the answering machine was blinking red. 3 new messages. Mom, call me back. Ryan's voice said on the first one, too casual. The second, I need to explain something. Don't talk to anyone at the bank. The third came hours later, lower, sharper. Why would you go behind my back? I deleted all 3, but the silence afterward felt worse. That night, I set the kettle to boil and laid the forged paper on the table. I kept staring at my false signature, trying to imagine his hand steadying over mine, dragging the curve of the sea, pretending love could excuse theft. My anger rose and fell like a slow tide washing through years of excuses. His late-night calls, his tears, the endless. I just need a little help. I wanted to protect him. I still did. But for the first time, the word protect felt dangerous. I took a pen from the drawer, the same black one I'd used for bills and birthday cards, and pressed its tip to a scrap of paper. My hand trembled, the ink pooling too dark. I scrawled my name once, twice, the real one messy and human. Then I compared it to the forgery. His version was smooth, mechanical, confident. Mine shook with fear and truth. I whispered into the quiet kitchen, "You can fake a signature, Ryan, but not a mother's knowing." When the kettle screamed, I didn't move to silence it. The sound filled the house until the air itself seemed to vibrate, and for the first time in a long while, I let it. I didn't want to go. Every part of me knew it was a bad idea, but when Ryan called that Saturday, his tone had softened, almost boyish. "Come to dinner, Mom. Just family. Let's start over. Start over." The phrase had a familiar ring, one we'd used after every fight, every broken promise. I told myself I'd go only to keep the peace, not to forgive. I spent the afternoon roasting chicken and setting the table with the blue plates Frank loved. The motions steadied me. They arrived just after 6. Ryan looked sharper than usual, collared shirt hair combed back, the kind of presentation he used when he wanted something. Lena wore a new coat and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I poured wine, forcing conversation about the weather, the neighborhood, the taste of the food, everything careful. Halfway through dinner, Ryan set his glass down with a soft thud. "So, Mom," he began, voice light. I sorted that paperwork issue. The bank called me too. All good now. I swallowed a piece of chicken that suddenly felt like gravel. They called you, yeah, he said, shrugging. Miscommunication. It's fixed. You don't need to worry. Lena's fork hovered over her plate. Ryan. She started, but he shot her a look sharp enough to silence her. What exactly did you tell them? I asked, keeping my tone steady. He leaned back, smile fading. That you approved the application, obviously. They just needed verbal confirmation. I froze. The air between us turned brittle. You told them I approved it. His expression tightened. It's just business, Mom. Everyone does this. You'll be fine. Across the table, Lena's eyes glistened. She looked like she wanted to vanish. I don't approve of fraud, I said quietly. Fraud. He barked a short laugh. Don't be dramatic. You've always said family sticks together. The words sliced through me. Family sticks together. The same phrase Frank used when Ryan wrecked his first car when we paid the insurance. The same phrase I'd repeated every time I bailed him out, but this time it sounded like a curse. Ryan, I said, setting down my fork, this isn't sticking together. This is using me. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. You don't understand what it's like out there. You have your house, your pension. We're drowning and you're sitting here acting like a victim. Because I am one, I said. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Lena reached for his arm. Ryan, please. He pulled away. You think she's innocent in this? She's letting everything fall apart because she wants to play righteous. I stood up. My knees trembled, but my voice didn't. You forged my name. He slammed his hand against the table. The plates rattled. I did it for us. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. The ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, even the sound of my own breath. I looked at him, my boy, my mistake, my mirror, and felt something deep inside me break. I think you should leave, I said. He blinked. What? Now. Ryan. Lena stood quickly, grabbing her purse. Evelyn, I'm sorry. But I raised my hand. Please go. They left in silence. The door closed softly behind them, followed by the faint crunch of gravel under tires. I didn't cry right away. Instead, I cleared the table, each clink of porcelain louder than the last. I stacked plates, poured the wine down the sink, wiped crumbs into my palm. The normalcy of it felt surreal, like performing a ritual for a family that no longer existed. When I finally sat down, the house echoed with its own emptiness. I could still smell the roasted chicken, the faint perfume Lena wore, the sharp scent of spilled wine on the tablecloth. All evidence of a meal that never really happened. A knock startled me. It was nearly 10. I opened the door to find my neighbor Joyce holding a plate of pie. Thought I'd bring you some, she said, her gaze flicking over my shoulder. Everything all right? Sounded heated. I hesitated. Just family talk. She gave a small, knowing smile. Family talk never stays small. Take care, honey. After she left, I sat on the porch pie, untouched the night pressing cold against my skin. The stars were dim through a haze of thin clouds. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked sharp and lonely. I thought about Clara's face, the papers, the perfect forged loop of my signature. How easily love could turn into leverage. I told myself I should call her file the report and this before it spiraled. But my hands wouldn't move. Inside, the house glowed faintly in the window's reflection, the living room lights spilling over photographs of Ryan as a child, grinning gap-toothed innocent. I couldn't bring myself to look at them for long. The air bit at my throat, each breath sharp as glass. I whispered to no one, "He's not my boy anymore." And for the first time, I meant it. The next morning, the house felt hollow, not quiet, but emptied. Even the refrigerator's hum seemed to pause between breaths. I stood at the kitchen window, staring at the frost clinging to the glass. Somewhere down the street, a car started, and the sound echoed like a memory that didn't belong to me anymore. I hadn't heard from Ryan or Lena since the dinner. I told myself I was relieved, but my hands betrayed me, trembling whenever the phone buzzed, tightening when silence stretched too long. By noon, a soft knock came at the door. The mailman handed me a small envelope stamped with the First Union logo. No return address, just my name in black print. Inside was a copy of the loan documents Clara had promised to send for verification. My breath caught when I saw the first page. There it was again, my name, my supposed signature copied perfectly beneath the section marked Collateral Primary Residence Evelyn Carter. The date next to it was from last week. But what struck me wasn't the signature itself. It was the watermark faintly visible behind it, the same floral emblem printed on our old deed papers that Ryan had once borrowed years ago, claiming he wanted to organize the family files. I sank into the armchair, the envelope sliding from my hands. When I looked up, my eyes landed on the framed photograph above the mantel, Ryan at 20 arm, slung around Frank's shoulder, both of them smiling at something just out of frame. The light in their eyes was effortless then. It hurt to remember that kind of light. My thoughts spiraled through years of small lies, the late-night calls, the temporary loans, the half-truths wrapped in apologies. They all had the same rhythm. I'd always forgiven him because forgiveness was easier than confrontation. But now forgiveness had a price tag with too many zeros. A car door shut outside. I peeked through the curtain and froze. Lena stood in the driveway, her posture hunched, hands shoved into her coat pockets. She didn't look like the woman from dinner. No makeup, no mask, just exhaustion. I opened the door before she could knock. "Can we talk?" she asked. Her breath fogged in the cold. I nodded, motioning her inside. She hesitated at the threshold like she wasn't sure she was welcome. We sat in the living room. I noticed how her gaze drifted to the old family photos, to the empty space at the table. "He's at work," she said quietly, twisting her fingers. "I came alone. Does he know you're here?" She shook her head. "He wouldn't want me to talk to you. What about—" Her eyes filled. "About the debt. About everything." She took a shaky breath. "Ryan told you it was business, right? It's not. It's gambling. Online markets leverage trades things he doesn't understand. He thought he could win it all back before you found out." My stomach sank. How much did he lose? 300,000. Maybe more. I tried to stop him, but he's been lying for months. He even used my name on smaller loans. When he forged yours, I begged him not to. He said you'd forgive him. You always do. The words struck hard because they were true. Forgiveness had been my armor and my weakness. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because it's getting worse," she whispered. "There are people calling the house. He's scared, and when he's scared, he gets mean. I don't know what to do anymore." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the wall clock. Then I reached for the envelope on the table and handed it to her. "Do you see this?" I asked. She nodded, eyes widening. "Oh my God, he really did it. I needed to be sure," I said. "Now I am." Lena covered her face with her hands, crying quietly. When she finally looked up, her expression was hollow. "Please don't tell him I came here." I nodded. "I won't, but I can't protect him anymore." She stood wiping her cheeks. "You shouldn't have to." After she left, I stayed in the same spot for what felt like hours. The sun sank lower, painting the living room in fading orange light. Dust motes drifted through the air like tiny ghosts. I went to the dresser and pulled open the drawer. The envelope was still there, sitting beside the loan copy. I reached for a pen and wrote on the outside proof. Then I closed the drawer again, not as a hiding place this time, but as a decision. Before bed, I called Clara. "You were right," I said. "It wasn't a mistake." Her tone softened. "Do you want to move forward with the report?" I hesitated, glancing toward the window where the frost had begun to creep inward, silver and delicate. "Not yet. I need to do something first." When I hung up, I walked to the mantel and stared at that old photograph again. Frank's eyes seemed to follow me, calm, steady. He'd always been the one who could say no and mean it. I whispered to the frame, "Teach me how." Then I turned off the lights, leaving only the faint glow from the street lamp outside. In the dark, the sound of my heartbeat filled the room, steady and unshaken. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a mother waiting to be forgiven. I felt like a woman preparing to be free. The storm came on a Tuesday night. Loud rain, heavy wind, the kind that makes the house feel smaller. I was sitting in the living room knitting half-heartedly when headlights swept across the wall. A car door slammed, followed by footsteps pounding up the porch. I knew before the knock who it was. "Mom, open up." Ryan's voice urgent, sharper than I'd ever heard it. I hesitated, then unlatched the door. He stood there soaked through hair plastered to his forehead, a folder clutched tight under his arm. His eyes had that wild shine, the same one he'd had as a boy when he'd been caught lying about a broken window. "Ryan, it's late." He pushed past me without answering. "We need to talk." Water dripped onto the hardwood floor. He set the folder on the coffee table, flipping it open with trembling fingers. "You talked to Clara," he said flatly. I closed the door. "She called me." "You didn't have to make it worse," he snapped. "Now the bank's freezing the account. I can't fix anything unless you help me." I folded my arms. "Help you? You forged my signature." He laughed short and bitter. "You think that matters now? I was going to pay it off. You just made everything harder." The tone, the deflection, it was like listening to a stranger wearing my son's voice. "What's in the folder?" I asked. He took a deep breath, opening it. Fresh documents neatly printed. "Revised forms," he said, sliding them toward me. "If you sign these, it'll clear the whole thing. They'll rewrite the loan under my name eventually. It's just a temporary fix." The papers stared back at me, a mirror of our last conversation. Only now his voice carried no pretense of warmth. "Ryan," I said quietly, "stop." He kept talking fast and practiced. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. These people aren't just bankers, Mom. They don't care who gets hurt." He looked at me, then eyes wet, but not from the rain. Fear lived behind them, but not guilt. Desperation, maybe. A cornered kind of panic. I felt something inside me soften for a heartbeat, the instinct to rescue, to absorb, to fix. It was a mother's reflex as familiar as breath. But then my gaze fell on the ink-stained edge of the older documents on the table, and the feeling died where it stood. "I won't sign," I said. He blinked as if he hadn't heard. "What?" "You heard me." His jaw clenched. "You'd really let me lose everything? After everything I've done for you?" I almost laughed. "What have you done for me, Ryan? Besides take." He stepped closer. "You think you're better than me, sitting here in your nice house pretending you don't owe me anything? You and Dad gave me nothing but pressure." The words hit hard, sharper than intended. I felt the years between us collapse every late-night shift I'd worked to keep food on the table, every time I'd bitten my tongue instead of saying no. "You were given everything that mattered," I said softly. "You just never learned the difference between love and a blank check." He slammed his palm against the wall. The sound cracked through the house. "You don't get it." I stepped back. My voice stayed calm, steady. "You need to leave." He stared at me, rain dripping from his coat, breathing hard. "If you don't sign, they'll come after me, after Lena. Then tell them the truth," I said. "Tell them you forged your mother's name." His face twisted, a mix of anger and disbelief. "You'd let that happen. I'm not letting anything happen. You did." For a moment, he just stood there, chest heaving. Then he grabbed the papers and stuffed them back into the folder. "You'll regret this." He turned toward the door, then paused, glancing back. "You think this makes you strong, but it doesn't. You're just old and bitter. You'll die alone in this house, and no one will care." The words hung in the air long after he was gone. When the door shut, I felt my knees give. I sank to the floor, palms pressed against the cool wood, the sound of rain pounding against the roof like applause for something tragic. After a while, I got up and locked the door, not just the latch, but the deadbolt. For the first time in my life, I locked my son out. In the quiet that followed, I could hear the faint ticking of the old wall clock, steady and unforgiving. I went to my bedroom, the same one Frank and I had shared for decades. His slippers still sat neatly by the dresser. I slipped one of mine off and let my bare foot touch the cold floor. Somewhere between grief and relief, I whispered, "He's not coming back tonight." Before bed, I checked the locks again, every window, every latch. I even wedged a chair beneath the doorknob, a small fortress for a woman who had finally stopped trying to save everyone else. As I lay there, the wind howled outside rain, streaking down the glass, like handwriting I couldn't quite read. I thought of Clara's words, "Don't let guilt decide your next step." For the first time, I believed her. The morning after Ryan's visit, the house smelled of damp wood and stale fear. I hadn't slept. Every sound from the street set my nerves alight: the engine of a passing car, the scrape of a branch against the siding, the faint groan of the old house shifting. I kept waiting for his knock again, but it never came. When daylight finally filtered through the curtains, pale and uncertain, I decided I couldn't stay trapped inside my own walls anymore. I dressed carefully: wool slacks, my best gray coat, the one Frank always said made me look like someone who means business. I tucked the folder of documents into my purse next to the pen I'd used to scrawl my name on every check that had ever saved my son. This time it wouldn't be for him. The bank was almost empty, the kind of quiet reserved for places where people bring shame instead of money. Clara met me in the lobby, her expression both gentle and professional. "Mrs. Carter," she said softly, "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't either," I admitted. She led me to her office, closing the door behind us. The blinds filtered sunlight into thin stripes across her desk. The same papers lay there perfectly aligned, waiting like evidence in a courtroom. "I looked deeper," she said, opening the file. "It's clear your signature was copied. There's metadata attached to the digital submission showing it came from a computer registered to your son's address." I felt my breath catch. Hearing it out loud made everything solid, irreversible. Clara leaned forward. "You can file a fraud report today. It will protect your assets. But I won't lie to you, it could also trigger a criminal investigation. It might even go to court." I stared at the papers. The edges gleamed under the light, crisp and innocent looking. "If I report him," I said quietly, "he could lose everything." Clara nodded. "If you don't, you might." Her words fell like stones in the space between us. For a long moment, I couldn't answer. My mind went back to the night before, the look in Ryan's eyes when he'd said, "You'll regret this." There had been fear there, but also fury, the kind that doesn't vanish. "What happens if I wait?" I asked. "You can freeze the account temporarily, but that only buys time," she said. "If he tries to use your name again, the bank might assume consent. I can't protect you unless you act officially." I nodded slowly. "You've been kind to me, Clara." "This isn't kindness," she said. "It's clarity." The word lodged somewhere deep in my chest. I didn't sign anything that day. I told her I needed time, and she didn't push. Instead, she handed me a cup of water and said, "You're not the first mother who's had to choose between blood and truth." On the drive home, the sky shifted from silver to pewter. The rain had eased, leaving behind a film of mist over the asphalt. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, the folder beside me on the passenger seat like a silent passenger. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the side mirror. My eyes looked tired, but different focused. I realized with a small shock that I hadn't cried since the night Ryan stormed out. Grief was changing shape. It was no longer heavy, but sharp, something I could wield. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a car parked across the street. Not Ryan's, a stranger's. A gray sedan with tinted windows. My heart thudded once, then steadied. I waited a full minute before getting out, scanning the quiet street. No one moved. No one called my name. I told myself it was nothing a coincidence, but I locked the door behind me anyway. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table, spreading the documents out one last time. I thought of Frank again, of how he'd faced every decision like it was a mirror. He never looked away, even when the reflection was ugly. I whispered to the empty room, "What would you have done?" The refrigerator hummed softly in reply, the same note it had always carried during our arguments. I smiled faintly. "Yeah," I said, "I know." I took out a notebook from the drawer, the one where I'd written grocery lists and to-do reminders. On a clean page, I wrote in large, deliberate letters, "Things that are mine." 1. My name. 2. My house. 3. My peace. I underlined the last word twice. Then I added another line. Things I can lose and survive. 1. My son. The pen slipped slightly at the end, leaving a small dot of ink like a tear. I stared at it until it blurred. That evening, Clara called to check in. Her voice was careful. "Whatever you decide, I'll make sure you're protected," she said. "But please be cautious. If he feels cornered, he might reach out again." I thanked her and promised to be careful. After hanging up, I walked through the house, turning off every light except the lamp by the window. Its warm glow spilled onto the snow gathering outside. I sat in the armchair and watched the flakes fall slow and deliberate, like they knew what it meant to start over. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like a witness, someone standing still, while the storm revealed everything that had been hiding beneath it. When I finally went to bed, I didn't lock the door. Not because I trusted Ryan, but because I trusted myself to say no if he came back. Sleep came easily. 3 days passed before it happened. I woke that morning to a sound like paper brushing against wood, soft, deliberate. When I stepped into the hallway, a folded note lay under the front door, half damp from the melting frost. My heart stuttered before my mind caught up. I knew his handwriting immediately. The letters were heavy, pressed hard into the paper, as if he'd carved each word with anger. "Mom, please read this. I didn't mean for things to go this far. I just need your help. Sign the form, and I swear I'll make it right. You know I'm not a bad person. Don't ruin our family over this." The signature line was empty, but a pen mark lingered at the bottom of the page, a single black stroke, almost a taunt. I stood there for a long time, the note trembling in my hand. I wanted to believe him. God help me, I did. That small pleading please clawed at every part of me that still remembered his first scraped knee, his first heartbreak, the boy who used to run to me for comfort. But this wasn't that boy. This was a man who used guilt like a key. I refolded the note and carried it to the kitchen, where I laid it beside the stack of loan papers. The sight of them together made my stomach twist, lies layered on top of love. The phone rang. Clara again. "Mrs. Carter." "I wanted to update you," she said. "The fraud report hasn't been filed yet, but we've put a temporary freeze on the loan. If he tries to access any funds under your name, the transaction will fail." I closed my eyes. Relief and dread tangled together. "Thank you." She hesitated. "Are you all right?" I let out a breath that sounded like a laugh. "Define all right." Her tone softened. "Just remember, being firm doesn't make you cruel." After we hung up, I went to the dresser and pulled open the top drawer. The envelope with proof scrawled on it sat where I'd left it. I added the note to the pile, pressing it flat. My hands shook, but not from fear, from decision. I'd thought strength would feel like steel. It didn't. It felt like ache, like holding your breath underwater and realizing you can't stay down forever. By afternoon, the clouds thickened again, heavy and gray, the kind of sky that promises more snow but never delivers right away. I made tea and sat at the table staring at the porch. I half expected to see Ryan's car, half dreaded it. When someone knocked, my body flinched. But it wasn't Ryan. It was Lena. She looked thinner than before, eyes hollow, hands red from the cold. "He doesn't know I'm here," she said quickly. "He's been gone all day, meeting people. I think he's in trouble." "Come in," I said. She stepped inside, clutching her bag like a lifeline. "He's angry, Evelyn. He said you turned on him. He's talking about lawyers now, about you owing him for years of support. He's unraveling." I led her to the kitchen, poured her tea. "You don't owe him your silence anymore," I said. She nodded weakly. "I know. I just don't know what happens next." For a long moment, the only sound was the clock ticking steady, indifferent. Then I said, "What happens next is, I stop pretending he'll change." Lena looked up startled. "You're going to report him?" I didn't answer directly. "I'm going to protect what's left of my life." She sipped her tea, tears spilling quietly. "You remind me of my mother," she said. "She used to think love meant fixing everything. It almost killed her." That night after Lena left, I found myself pacing. I couldn't shake the image of Ryan's handwriting, those pressed-in words, desperate and accusing all at once. I unfolded the note again, reading the line that struck deepest. "Don't ruin our family over this." For the first time, I realized he already had. I went to my bedroom window. Outside, snow had begun to fall again, soft and silent. The porch light flickered, catching on the frost. My reflection stared back in the glass, older, sharper, unfamiliar, but honest. I whispered to her, "He's not the only one who can sign something." I fetched the notebook from the drawer, tore out a clean page, and began to write, "To whom it may concern. I, Evelyn Carter, did not consent to any financial agreements under the names of Ryan or Lena Carter. Any signatures bearing my name have been forged without my knowledge or approval." My hand was steady this time. I signed it with the real curve of my C crooked and unmistakably mine. Then I slipped the statement into the same folder that held the evidence. Before bed, I slid the folder under my arm and carried it to the hallway closet, not to hide it, but to place it where it couldn't be missed if anything happened to me. As I closed the door, the note under the front door fluttered slightly from the draft. The black ink glinted faintly under the porch light, the word "please" bleeding into the paper from melted snow. I whispered not to him, but to myself. No more. Then I turned off the light, the word echoing softly in the dark, not as defiance, but as release. The following morning the sky was the color of old pewter. Frost feathered the window panes, and the air in the house carried a bite that no heater could soften. I sat at the kitchen table with my second cup of coffee, going cold, the folder of documents lying open beside me like a wound I couldn't close. When the knock came, it wasn't tentative this time. 2 quick raps, 1 pause, then another. I braced myself before opening the door. Lena stood there again, wrapped in a thin coat, her hair damp from melted snow. Her eyes darted up and down the street before she stepped inside. "He's gone," she said quietly. "I don't know where. He took the car last night and hasn't come home." She looked smaller somehow, folded in on herself. I gestured toward the couch and she sank into it, rubbing her gloved hands together. "Sit," I said gently. "I'll make tea." When I set the cup in front of her, she didn't reach for it. She just stared at the steam-rising eyes glassy. "He's been lying to me," she whispered. "More than I even realized." I stayed silent, letting her find her rhythm. "He said it was all going to turn around," she continued, "that he just needed one more investment to fix everything. But yesterday a man came to the house asking for him someone I've never seen. He said Ryan owes people more than money now. He said if we don't pay, they'll take it another way." I felt my chest tighten. "Another way," she nodded. "He meant violence. I think he meant me." For a moment I couldn't breathe. "Lena, you can't stay there." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm here. I wanted to be angry at her for staying silent, for helping him, for watching him drown us both. But when I looked at her, all I saw was the same fear that had lived inside me for months. The fear of doing nothing and calling it love." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small USB drive, setting it on the table. "This has everything. Messages, emails, screenshots, proof of what he did, the gambling accounts, the transfers, the fake documents. I kept copies just in case." I stared at the drive, then at her trembling hands. "Why bring it to me?" "Because you're the only one who'll do the right thing," she said. Her voice broke. "I can't. If I report him, he'll find me. But if you do—" She trailed off. The weight of her words settled heavy between us. I hadn't planned on being anyone's avenger, just a mother protecting herself. But the evidence she'd placed in my hands was too much to ignore. "Clara can help," I said. "You'll come with me." She shook her head quickly. "I can't be seen there again. If Ryan finds out I talked to you, then I'll go alone," I said. She looked up, startled by the certainty in my voice. "You're not afraid I am," I admitted. "But fear doesn't get to decide anymore." Her eyes filled. She took a shaky breath. "I don't know how you're still standing." I smiled faintly. "Because I finally stopped bending." I left her with a blanket and a sandwich, promising to call Clara before noon. As I backed out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of her through the window, curled up on the couch, like someone who hadn't slept in days. At the bank, Clara met me again. No appointment this time, just urgency. I handed her the USB drive and my signed statement. "Everything you need is in there," I said. She looked at me carefully. "You're certain you want to move forward?" "Yes." Her expression softened into something almost like pride. "Then let's do this properly." For the next hour, I answered questions, signed affidavits, and described the sequence of events in detail. Each signature felt less like surrender and more like reclamation, every loop of my name a small piece of dignity reclaimed from the wreckage. When it was done, Clara said she'd file everything that afternoon. "You might want to stay somewhere else for a while," she suggested. "I have a friend nearby." I lied. "I'll be fine." Driving home, the sky had turned to a dull gray bruise. Snow flurries drifted lazily across the road, catching in the headlights like ghosts. As I pulled into my driveway, I caught my reflection in the car window. Tired, yes, but alive in a way I hadn't been for years. Inside, Lena was dozing on the couch, wrapped in the blanket I'd given her. I didn't wake her. I just sat beside the window watching the street. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like prey. I was the witness now, the one who could name what had happened and refuse to hide it. The house creaked in the wind, a long, low sigh. I whispered into the quiet. "It's over, Frank." I finally said no. The clock ticked once as if to mark the moment. When I looked back at the window, my reflection met my gaze, the woman who had stopped running from her own truth. I barely recognized her, but I liked her. The call came that evening just after sunset. I was washing dishes, my hands buried in warm, soapy water, when the phone buzzed on the counter. The sound startled me, the sharp vibration slicing through the quiet house. "Mom." His voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that hides something ugly underneath. "Ryan," I said, drying my hands. "Where are you?" "You've been busy," he said. "You went to the bank." I said nothing. The silence between us stretched taut as wire. "You think you can destroy me?" His voice cracked, rising. "Do you know what you've done? They froze everything. Everything, Mom. You've humiliated me." My fingers tightened on the phone. "You humiliated yourself," I said quietly. For a moment, all I heard was his breathing, ragged and uneven. "Then I'm coming over." I wanted to tell him not to say the police were involved now, to make him afraid enough to stay away. But the words caught in my throat. Some part of me knew this confrontation had been waiting its turn all along. 20 minutes later, I saw his car headlights sweep across the front yard. The sky had gone from bruised gray to pitch-black stars smothered by clouds. I didn't bother locking the door this time. "Let him come." He burst through without knocking. Snow clung to his jacket, melting into dark patches on the floor. His face was pale, jaw tight. "You went behind my back," he said. "I went behind a crime," I corrected. He laughed bitterly. "You're going to send your own son to jail if that's what the truth demands." His eyes flashed. "Truth. You're choosing strangers over family. You think that banker cares about you? You're just another file to her." "She cares enough not to lie to me," I said. He stepped closer, voice dropping. "Do you have any idea what they'll do to me if this goes public? You think you'll feel righteous then, watching your own child rot because you couldn't let go of your pride." I didn't flinch. "Pride didn't get us here, Ryan. You did." He paced, running his hands through his hair, desperate energy spilling out of him. "You always had to be the victim," he said. "Dad dies, and suddenly you're the saint, the martyr. I was just supposed to take care of myself, right? No help, no support. I felt the sting of old wounds, but I didn't let them show. I gave you everything I could. You turned it into debt. Because you never believed in me," he shouted. "You never thought I could make something of myself. I believed in you too much," I said softly. "That's the problem." He froze. For a heartbeat, the anger drained from his face, replaced by something almost like fear. Then he slammed his hand on the table. "You don't understand. They'll come after you next. If you'd just signed the papers, none of this would be happening. Then maybe it should be happening," I said. "Maybe this is what it takes for you to see what you've become." He shook his head, disbelief hardening back into rage. "You think you're safe because you filed a report? You have no idea what you've started." I took a step forward, closing the distance between us. The air felt thick electric. "What I started," I said, "was the truth. You can't bury that under forged ink." For a long moment he said nothing. His shoulders sagged, eyes darting to the folder still sitting on the kitchen counter. He reached for it. I placed my hand over it first. "Don't," I said. He looked at me, really looked for the first time in months. Whatever he saw there stopped him cold. "You'd turn your back on me," he whispered. "I already did," I said. "The night you lied to my face." He straightened, jaw set. "You'll regret this, Mom." Maybe I said, "But I'll regret it as myself, not as your accomplice." For a moment he looked like he might say something else. Then he turned and stormed toward the door, his footsteps echoing through the small house. When the screen door slammed behind him, the sound rattled the picture frames on the wall, the last one still holding a photo of us taken long before everything went wrong. I stood there, heart pounding, the smell of cold air and rain drifting in through the open door. I walked outside and onto the porch. He was already halfway down the driveway, his figure a dark shape against the snow. "Ryan," I called out. He stopped but didn't turn. "I love you," I said, "but I don't like who you are anymore." He didn't reply, just climbed into the car, slammed the door, and drove away, taillights vanishing into the dark. I stayed on the porch for a long time, the night pressing cold against my skin. My breath clouded in the air, fading quickly like everything else between us. Inside, I closed the door, locked it once, a quiet final click. The house seemed to exhale. I sank into a chair, my whole body trembling, not with fear, but release. The old wall clock chimed once, a low, resonant sound. I whispered to the empty room, "It's over." And for the first time, I believed it. The morning after Ryan's visit, I woke before sunrise. The house was still and cold, a pale blue light creeping in through the curtains. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped, listening to the wind breathe against the windows. Something in the air had changed. Not peace exactly, something sharper, clearer, like standing at the edge of a long frozen lake and hearing the first crack of thaw. Clara called at 8. Her voice was steady, but cautious. "The bank's legal team has reviewed everything," she said. "They'll need your official statement in person to finalize the fraud report. Once you sign, it's done." The word sign made me flinch, but only for a moment. "I'll be there by noon," I said. Before leaving, I paused by the mantel. The photograph of Frank and Ryan still stood there, father and son, sunlight in their eyes. For years I'd dusted that frame like it was sacred, afraid to disturb the illusion of harmony it held. Today, I picked it up and turned it face down. Outside, the air bit at my cheeks. The snow had hardened overnight, crusted over with ice. My breath came out in small clouds as I walked to the car, each one dissolving faster than the last. The drive to the bank felt longer than it ever had before. Clara met me in the lobby, a folder tucked under her arm. "You're sure about this?" she asked as we walked toward her office. "I've never been more sure of anything I said." We sat across from each other at the small desk. She slid the document toward me. I stared at the blank line, waiting for my name. My pulse thudded in my ears. For months, my life had been ruled by that space, by what Ryan wanted to fill it with, by the guilt I'd let him write into it. Now it was mine again. I took the pen. "This one's real," I said quietly and signed. When I handed the form back, Clara's eyes softened. "You did the right thing," she said. The words should have felt comforting. They didn't. They felt like a verdict. As I left her office, the lobby door opened, and there he was. Ryan. He looked exhausted, hair disheveled, eyes red from sleeplessness. For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other, the bank's fluorescent lights flattening every trace of warmth between us. "Mom," he said, voice low, "we need to talk. There's nothing left to talk about." He glanced toward the reception desk where Clara stood, then back at me. "You can still fix this," he whispered. "Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. They'll drop the investigation." "It wasn't a misunderstanding," I said. He took a step closer. "You'd rather destroy your family than admit you overreacted." "I'm saving what's left of it," I said, "even if that means cutting out the rot." He winced like I'd struck him. "You don't mean that." I almost wished I didn't, but the words had already settled into truth. "Go home, Ryan." He reached for my arm, but I stepped back. "Don't," I said sharply. The security guard at the door shifted his weight, watching. Ryan's hand fell. "Mom, please," he said, his voice breaking. "I was trying to protect us by stealing from me." His face twisted. "You'll regret this," he said again, the same words he'd thrown at me before, but this time they sounded tired, hollow. I turned away. I already regret enough. I walked past him out through the glass doors. The winter light hit me full in the face, cold, brilliant, almost blinding. Behind me, I heard him call my name, the syllables echoing off the marble floor. I didn't turn back. Outside, the air stung my lungs. I pulled my coat tight and kept walking. Each step felt heavier but cleaner, the weight shifting from guilt to something steadier freedom. When I reached the edge of the parking lot, I stopped and looked up. Snowflakes were falling again, light and slow, catching in my hair. For years, I'd carried the belief that motherhood meant endless forgiveness, that if I just gave enough, he'd find his way back. But forgiveness without accountability isn't love, it's permission. Through the bank's glass doors, I could still see him standing there, shoulders slumped, watching me go. For a moment, I thought I saw the boy he once was, the one who used to wave from the schoolyard, calling my name with pride. I let myself grieve him just for a heartbeat. Then I turned toward the street. Each breath I took turned to mist and vanished. Each step away from the bank felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost. When I reached the corner, the wind caught my hair and pushed me forward. I didn't resist. It wasn't a dramatic exit. No slammed doors or shouted words, just the simple, unshakable act of leaving. And in the silence that followed, the only sound was the crunch of snow beneath my boots, steady and sure, leading me home. The days that followed blurred together soft mornings, long shadows, and a quiet that filled every corner of the house like snowfall. I thought the silence would feel empty, but it didn't. It felt earned. Ryan didn't call, neither did Lena. There were no knocks on the door, no envelopes slipped under the frame. Even the mailbox seemed to hold its breath. For the first time in months, I could make a cup of coffee without waiting for the phone to ring with bad news. I could look out the window and see the world as it was, not as a place waiting to demand something from me. I packed slowly, one drawer at a time. My sister Nora had offered me her guest room when she heard what happened. Just until things settle, she said. I hadn't told her everything, only enough to explain why my voice shook when she asked about Ryan. She didn't press. Some wounds didn't need to be narrated to be understood. I filled a single suitcase, a few sweaters, Frank's watch, the folder of documents, and a small box of photographs. The rest I left. The house, with its hollow quiet and familiar creaks, had become a place of ghosts, not the kind that haunt, but the kind that linger in the walls, whispering reminders. Before leaving, I walked through each room one last time. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon soap. The living room window still framed the maple tree Frank had planted the year Ryan was born. I touched the bark earlier that morning, cold and rough under my palm. Even that tree had learned how to survive storms. When I reached the bedroom, I found something I hadn't noticed before. An envelope on the floor by the dresser slid halfway beneath the rug. My heart skipped. I crouched and pulled it free. No return address, just my name. Inside was a letter, handwritten. The paper trembled in my hands as I unfolded it. Mom, I'm not good at this. You probably won't want to read anything from me, but I need to say it. I never meant to hurt you. I thought I could fix it before you knew. I messed everything up. I don't know how to make it right anymore. I'm leaving for a while. Don't worry, I'm not doing anything stupid. I just need space. Please don't hate me. I'll pay you back somehow. I promise. The handwriting wavered near the end as though written in a shaking car. No address. No way to reply. I read it twice, then a third time. It didn't make me cry, not anymore. The tears had been spent long ago. Instead, I felt something smaller, sadder, but quieter pity. Not for him, but for what he'd done to himself. I folded the letter and placed it in the same folder that held the bank documents, not as evidence, but as closure. Outside, snow had begun again, light and lazy. I loaded the suitcase into the trunk of my car and stood in the driveway. The house looked the same as it always had, but it no longer felt like mine. Maybe it never really had. For years it had been a monument to giving every room, every object touched by sacrifice. Now it felt like an empty shell, waiting for something honest to live inside it. I drove to Nora's house 2 towns over. Her home sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac with warm lights glowing through the curtains. She hugged me before I'd even closed the car door. "You did what you had to do," she said softly. "I know," I said. "It just doesn't feel like winning." "It's not supposed to," she replied. "Justice isn't loud." That night I slept in a bed that didn't creak with memories. I dreamed of Frank standing on the porch, his face turned toward the wind. He didn't speak. He just nodded the way he used to when he was proud of me, but too stubborn to say it out loud. When I woke, the dream stayed with me. I made coffee in Nora's kitchen, watching sunlight creep across the snow. For a moment I thought of calling Ryan, just to make sure he was alive, just to hear his voice. But then I remembered his threats, his lies, his forged signature beside mine. I remembered the woman I'd become by walking away. Instead, I opened my notebook and wrote a single line. "Silence is the sound of peace earned, not given." I closed it and set it aside. The rest of the day unfolded quietly. I helped Nora fold laundry. We watched a movie neither of us finished, and I laughed for the first time in months, not loudly, but genuinely. When night came, I stood by the window again. Snow glimmered under the porch light, each flake falling soft and certain. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for wanting distance. I whispered into the dark, "This is what justice feels like, Frank." Just silence. And for the first time, the silence answered back, not with words, but with peace. 2 months later, winter began to loosen its hold. The snow along the curbs turned thin and grainy, and you could smell damp earth underneath it when the sun came through. Nora's kitchen window looked out on her backyard, where a single robin kept testing the air, as if it weren't quite convinced spring was real. That morning, a plain white envelope waited in the mailbox. No handwriting I recognized, only the bank's embossed return address in the corner. For a moment, my pulse stuttered. Every envelope like that had once carried dread. But when I opened it, the letter inside was brief and kind. "Dear Mrs. Carter, the loan claim has been officially dismissed. Funds frozen under your name have been released. Mr. Ryan Carter has entered a restitution and counseling program as part of the settlement agreement. Thank you for your cooperation." I read it twice before I realized I was smiling. Not a wide, triumphant smile, something quieter, steadier. The kind that grows out of relief instead of victory. I set the paper on the table, poured myself another cup of coffee, and just watched the steam curl upward until it disappeared. Later, I drove back to my old house. It wasn't mine anymore. I'd listed it for sale the week before, but I wanted to see it one last time before letting it go. The neighborhood looked smaller somehow, as if the years had shrunk it. The maple tree in the yard stood bare but alive, its limbs creaking faintly in the breeze. I touched the trunk, feeling the rough bark under my palm, and whispered, "You made it through, too." Inside, the rooms were mostly empty. The echo of my footsteps filled the hallway. The faint scent of furniture polish lingered in the air, mixed with something colder, the smell of departure. I walked into the living room and found the picture frame I'd left face down on the mantel. I picked it up. The glass was dusty, the image inside slightly crooked Frank, with his hand on Ryan's shoulder, both of them laughing at something beyond the camera. I set the frame upright again, not out of nostalgia, but respect for the life that was not the one I kept trying to resurrect. I sat on the porch afterward, watching the street while the late afternoon light began to turn gold. Kids' voices carried faintly from somewhere down the block. Their laughter didn't hurt the way it used to. For years, I'd believed family was something you protected no matter the cost. Now I understood it differently. Family is what remains when protection turns honest, when love refuses to enable. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Mom, it's me. I heard about the ruling. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get better. Maybe one day we can talk. No threats, no excuses. Just words, shaky, unfinished human." I read them once, then again. Then I turned the phone face down. Some conversations can wait until both people are whole enough to have them. The air was growing colder again, the kind of evening chill that sneaks in before dusk. I pulled Frank's old coat tighter around me and stepped off the porch, my boots crunching through the thin crust of snow on the walkway. When I reached the edge of the yard, I stopped and looked back at the house. Every window glowed faintly from the sunset pale gold against the white siding. For years I'd thought that house was my duty, a shrine to everything I'd sacrificed. But standing there now, I saw it for what it really was, a story finished. As the wind rose, I closed my eyes and breathed it in. It was sharp but clean, the kind of cold that wakes instead of wounds. Somewhere deep in my chest, the heaviness that had lived there for months began to lift. "I did it, Frank," I murmured. I finally said no. The maple branches swayed, answering with a dry whisper. When I opened my eyes, the robin had returned to the tree. Feathers puffed a small splash of red against all that gray. It tilted its head as if listening, then took off into the brightening sky. I watched it until it vanished. Back in the car, I let the engine warm and looked at my hands resting on the steering wheel. They looked different, the same age-spotted skin, but steadier. The ink stain that had haunted my fingertip for months was finally gone. I drove home slowly, letting the silence fill the spaces between the sounds of the road. Each mile felt lighter, as if I were shedding the weight of every signature I'd ever given away. By the time I reached Nora's house, the first stars had appeared. I stood for a moment in her driveway, watching my breath drift upward into the clear night air, dissolving in seconds. Then I smiled small certain and went inside.